So I'm continuing my series of Master Retro reviews with Season 3, Episode 12, Adam's Ribs. Now this is probably one of my favorite episodes in Season 3, if not of the first 3 seasons as a whole. It's a great fun episode with some really great funny moments that I just love. So let's begin with recapping the episode. Hawkeye and Trapper are in the swamp and, well, it looks like Hawkeye's doing pool with golf balls while Trapper's doing golf with golf balls. Yeah, so that's what they're doing, and Hawkeye's complaining about lunch coming up because the past 11 days, Hawkeye thinks it was 9. He's apparently repressing some of the memories, but 11 days they've been having nothing but river and fish. And as Hawkeye was later to say in the episode, he's eating a river liver and an ocean of fish. And he says that when that's what they are served, and he basically starts a riot in the mess tent demanding that they want something else. Henry shoots him out, but Hawkeye looks at the skeleton in Henry's office and realizes that he wants ribs. He remembers a place in Chicago, but not the name. But he remembers it was near Dearborn Street Station, which Henry is familiar with. And he knows the phone number for Dearborn Street Station, which is Dearborn 7505, something like that. No, the type of phone numbers we don't use anymore, but he remembers it because apparently that was the first place his mother allowed him to go to the bathroom by himself, and that's apparently where he met his wife. Though another episode does contradict saying Henry met his wife at a freshman mixer. And we don't know if that was high school or college freshman mixer, but we know his alma mater is the U of I, which is not in Chicago. And he's from Bloomington, and I believe Bloomington area is where U of I is, if I remember everything correctly. There's several state universities in Illinois, by the way. So, yeah. But then again, no, Chicago is the big city there. As a city with broad shoulders. Sometimes people say big shoulders. Heck, you can get history books that reference those nicknames for Chicago right here. City of big shoulders, the history of Chicago. But that's besides the point. In the middle of the night, Hawkeye decides, you know what, he's going to call the Dearborn Street Station, get patched in, figure out what the name of that rib place is, and then he finds out it's Adam's Ribs, and he decides that he's going to place a takeout order. 40 pounds and a gallon of barbecue sauce. 40 pounds of uncooked ribs and a gallon of barbecue sauce. That's probably enough ribs, but ribs I know rely on a lot of barbecue sauce, so I feel like a gallon won't be enough. You need 2 gallons, and you already forgot the coleslaw. Okay, I will say this. I personally am fine with forgetting the coleslaw because I'm not a big coleslaw person. But I do understand a lot of people love it. And Hawkeye forgetting the coleslaw is brought up later again. Though when they contacted an old fling of trappers in order to actually pick up the barbecue ribs and send them to Korea, why couldn't they ask her if she would be willing to add some coleslaw to the order? I don't know why they didn't think that. But the ribs do make it to Korea, then they get stuck in supply, so Hawkeye and Trapper hitch a ride on the chopper where the injured patients coming from the front normally ride, and they get to the supply depot. The major, though, no help, so he sends them to his sergeant, telling them not to tell him. Yeah, his sergeant is apparently his boss, and basically they start trying, so when they couldn't get through reasoning with him, because they're claiming these ribs are actually medical supplies, guess what? That doesn't work, so then they go to basically say, well, this place is dirty, we would hate for it to get shut down, and Sergeant goes, what's really in there? And that's when Hawkeye reveals it's ribs from Chicago, and the Sergeant is like, Adam's Ribs? Because he's familiar with it, because he's from Joliet, Illinois. By the way, the Sergeant pronounces the name for Joliet, Illinois incorrectly.
I'm from Joliet. I'd walk to Chicago on my knees in the snow for a takeout order.
I'm standing in front of the sign. Actually, no, I'm in my room, but I could have gone on location. I had the opportunity, but oh well, back to on location. So as you can see on the sign, it's JOLIET. Now, you may ask, why is it pronounced Joliet rather than Joliet? You see the beginning part Jolly, and then you see an ET, so Joliet. Makes sense. No, it doesn't. First, we got to understand where the name came from. So, there's who the city is officially named after, and then there's a whole local lore behind it. Let's begin with, there's a nearby village called Romeoville, as in Romeo and Juliet. As local lore goes, Joliet was once called Joliet, Illinois, but supposedly President Van Buren suggested that it should be named for the French explorer Louis Joliet. In fact, right here, the Louis Joliet Mall. Joliet's Mall is named for Louis Joliet. And as I understand it, his name should be pronounced in French as Louis Joliet. Any native French speakers out there, feel free to correct me, but that's how I understand it's supposed to be pronounced in French. But back to the city sign. So we're back up in front of the city sign, and let's actually break down what's going on. So we have the JOLLIET, that's how it's spelled. Pretty standard, there's nothing confusing there. If you want to break that down so you can pronounce it correctly, you got to figure out where the syllables are. So the JO stands together, then the LI stands together, and then the ET stands together. Those are the rough syllables of Joliet. So you got JO, Joe, you got LE, Lee, you got the ET, et, JOL-lee-et. It's not perfect. Remember, we're anglicizing from French as well, so we got that confusion going on there. But Joliet is how everyone pronounces it. So just remember that it's not Jolly, it's Jolie. That's probably a little bit better. So a weird idea once meet somebody who somehow saw Dolly Parton's Jolene was somehow connected to Joliet. I don't understand. I think they were German. So there might have been some additional language barriers going on there. It was a weird thing. I just kind of shrugged it off like, okay, whatever. Things happen when you work in the tourist industry. But the point I do want to get on is that there likely was not somebody from Joliet or even nearby Joliet who knew how to pronounce it to correct the people on set or the writers. They just probably looked at a map, saw Joliet was nearby. Joliet used to have one of the biggest steel mills in the country, lots of history there, so of course it would make sense. And yeah, though thinking about it, maybe somebody from Plainfield might have been on set. I could see them saying it's pronounced Joliet just to get under the skin of those from Joliet. But let's get back to the review. This is a big side tangent. So back to the actual video. So they do negotiate. The sergeant gets 12 pounds of ribs and a pint and a half of barbecue sauce. No coleslaw because they forgot the coleslaw, but their excuse is that they're just draftees. Anyhow, they get the ribs, they get them cooked. They're about ready to eat. Hawkeye, Trapper, Klinger, Radar, and Henry. And then Wounded come in. Which is just a fitting way to end the episode. Hawkeye doesn't even get the ribs that he spent all that effort in getting. There's more to talk about the episode rather than just what happens. Like I said, I love the irony that Hawkeye never actually does get to eat the ribs he spent all that effort getting in. But there's several other good moments in the episode. Let's take the mess tent scene at the beginning where Hawkeye riles the camp up in a fever against having the same thing day after day, chanting, "We want something else. We want something else." That is actually a great scene, not just because it's a great comedic scene, especially with Radar still trying to eat his food, because apparently his mouth is tone deaf, his taste buds don't work basically, and also with Klinger in his dress and just kind of going along as well, doing more fancy moves and all that. And later in the episode where he gets mad that Hawkeye and demands that Hawkeye clean his one of his pieces of clothing because it got succotash on it. Just a great scene overall there. But another really important thing about that scene is it kind of gets onto how protests start. Protests can generally start with one person or a small group of people. And then as people realize, hey, I'm not the only one who's mad about this, the protest grows. Many other people in the camp were probably sick of eating liver and fish this day after day, and I think the servers were also sick of serving it day after day because they participate as well. But nobody was saying anything, nobody was speaking up until Hawkeye decided enough was enough, and he made a scene, and everyone joined in. Now, of course, he's partly chewed out from Henry because he's an officer doing this. He has a responsibility, an image, if you will, to keep up, which is actually more of a Colonel Potter thing than a Henry thing in my regard, because Colonel Potter actually, is military, regular army. But that's more besides the point. The point being is this episode does very much show an authentic way of a protest growing from a few disgruntled individuals who decide to speak up to a much bigger group of people, including everyone who is tired and do want to change. And Henry does recognize that, yeah, they shouldn't be eating the same thing day after day, and he's been trying to get a different food delivered to them, but instead they got aesthetic supporters, I believe, and a mess up in the army. But the point being, I want to transition to talking about with this is Henry was right to recognize they do need to have other food, but he also wasn't really pushing hard enough. Hawkeye took it in his own hands. Now, when you look at feeding soldiers, having good food is actually really important. It's said an army marches on its stomach. There's a reason why soldiers will pillage on the land, even in we even I know had that in World War II, and I'm sure we had that in Korea, Vietnam, and probably even into the more modern wars as well. Soldiers get tired of rations. They get tired of the same things, and they want changes. It's good for morale. Apparently, the U.S. Army today can, within 24 to 48 hours after securing a piece of land, they can deploy a fully functional chain fast food restaurant. Apparently, it's Burger King. That's overseas. They can apparently do that. And that's, whether how true that, I don't know. But the fact is that making sure soldiers can eat is really important, and it's important to keep their morale up, and having good food is a part of that. I know people online complain, veterans often complain about MREs. They have nicknames like meals rejected by everyone, meals rarely edible. I've seen people say that, and then a sentence or two later, they say, well, this one right here is my favorite, and I do anything to get, even now. And then they get another one, it's like, just like I remember. And while they may have liked every MRE, they did like that one. That one spoke to them. And also, there's also something to be said about have food, when you're in the field, cold and bitter. I'm sure that helps too. But the point being is that this episode does harken on to that reality that soldiers need good food. They need food that is tasty. It's very important for their morale. So this episode is a great episode. I love nearly everything about it, except for the mispronunciation of Joliet. But I can let that slide because the actor wasn't from Joliet. No, I'm sure, was anybody else on set. They just knew it was a city near Chicago, and they called it a day. It's the past, and all we can do is correct it. Now I need to get onto the Master Wiki and mention that goof going on, because it deserves to be mentioned. It should be on there. Anyhow, that's kind of besides the point of the episode. That's more of the fandom going on. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and I'll see you in the very next video. Thank you for watching my video. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to give this video a like and share. Also, consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date on all my latest content. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and as always, have a good day, a good night, wherever you are. May the force be with you, always.